Claiming my spouse harbors affections for my sister, my brother-in-law forbade us from the wedding. Days later, everyone's silent as truth darker began to fall apart. My sister and I had a roller coaster relationship constantly. Though we loved one another, we were not the kind of sisters who kept every secret or idea discussed. Though we had our times, yes, sporadic conflicts primarily over trivial matters, or our perceptions of family responsibilities, generally, I really adored her. So far, I had been delighted with her successes, helped her, and stood by her through every life event. Until this wedding catastrophe, our relationship had been very nice. Dan fits well in our family after nearly 4 years of marriage. I adored the sort of man Dan was, one who would try with the people I loved. He treated my sister like his own because he had no siblings, and their playful relationship sometimes even brought back memories of squabbling brothers. They taunted one another non-stop, and he even stayed with her when she needed it. She had been grappling with a business endeavor around a year ago. Dan had given her a loan to establish a modest internet jewelry store, interest-free. She wanted to do this. It was a sizable gift, and I would have been glad he would be helping her. I was so really taken aback when her wedding invitation came with that odd message requesting me not to bring Dan. Given their proximity, it seemed as if a smack in the face. At least 5 times I looked over the note, attempting to determine if it was a joke or whether I had missed some secret message. At first, Dan dismissed it as maybe she intended to execute some kind of wedding joke on him, but something about it just didn't set right with me. She responded vaguely, stating she was busy preparing and would call later, when I attempted to personally reach out to her and SMS her a few laid-back inquiries regarding the wedding. I phoned my mother as I cannot obtain a clear response from her. She laughed and said, "Oh, you know how your sister is. She's just being her silly self," when I inquired if she had heard anything about Dan not being invited. She speculated that maybe my sister was organizing a quirky reception activity. Her response only served to further perplexity and did not assist at all. My mother seemed not to take it seriously, which made me assume it may just be a harmless practical joke. Though I wasn't sure, at that moment I couldn't see why bringing him would do any actual damage. This was a wedding after all. It was meant to be a happy event, an opportunity for family to gather, rather than for strange rules and mental games. We arrived at the wedding location together on the day. I started to notice some individuals staring at us strangely. As soon as we entered, I tried to dismiss it, concentrating on the daily delight. Wanting to honor the big day, Dan and I had dressed somewhat more professionally than normal, so I reasoned that maybe they were simply observing us. Then I looked for my sister. She was in the midst of a chat with several of her bridesmaids, but her whole demeanor altered the moment she looked at Dan. Her face dropped and then changed to show an amazing degree of rage. She asked me why Dan was there, marching straight over and her voice quivering with rage. She failed to attempt to suppress her voice. Everyone around could clearly detect the harshness in her tone. The atmosphere was strained and humiliated by her response. Heat sprang to my cheeks. She insisted on insisting he wasn't meant to be there and that I was violating her desires even as I attempted to gently draw her away to speak alone. I told her the message had seemed like a joke, even Mom had thought, trying to cool her off. She wouldn't answer me straight when I asked her to inhale and indicate what the actual problem was. Rather, she began screaming louder, charging me of attempting to spoil her day. Her fiancé saw the disturbance and moved immediately in. I assumed he would attempt to arbitrate, to cool her down, but instead he sided with her right away, standing guardingly next to her and flashing at Dan. Then he suddenly moved forward and gave Dan a strong push, ordering him to go right now. I was very shocked. The circumstances had spun so far beyond anything I could have imagined, and I found myself divided between protecting my husband and safeguarding the little serenity that could still remain in my family. Still, at that time, things had gone too far. I grabbed Dan's hand, heartbroken, and we fled the site. That evening, I sat in shock. Dan was silent, and even though he didn't express it clearly, I could sense his devastation. He had not been aiming to create a scene or annoy anybody. We really thought we were doing morally. Later that evening, I attempted phoning my mother and sister in an attempt to sort things out, and apologies should we have broken any unstated boundaries. But no one responded. 2 days later, Dan gave me his phone and instructed me to review a post created by my sister's husband. Opening it, I found a lengthy, nasty tirade where he claimed that certain individuals were obviously fixated on him and his wife and cited disgusting people attempting to ruin our day. He never gave us names, but it was clear who he meant. Seeing it presented this way for the world to see felt like a betrayal. This was this guy, someone who ought to have been greeting family, accusing us publicly of doing maliciously just because we had ventured to come up. It made me feel powerless and was embarrassing and nasty. Since again, I attempted to get in touch to my sister and mother, thinking maybe now, since the wedding tension was gone, they would be ready to chat, but my calls went missed. All I'm interested in is what precisely I did wrong. Was I the evil person supposing my spouse would be welcome? Though it had looked absurd, should I have paid the letter any attention? Showing up, being there for her on her big day, and yet everything I had done appeared to have backfired. I had believed I was honoring her. When I confided in a few close friends, they shared my astonishment. Their minds couldn't seem to fit why my sister and her husband would respond so fiercely. Then one acquaintance said something I hadn't thought of. Maybe her spouse felt frightened by Dan's connection, or envious of her. Though that didn't make whole sense to me, it was the only reasonable justification available. Not heard from my sister or her spouse since that post. My family looks split. Some of the relatives reach out to apologize over what occurred, but they avoid supporting either side. Knowing that my family had been dragged into this mess, all because I didn't believe my sister's message was credible, hurts. I'm now left wondering whether I should have known better and challenging every choice and encounter. The hardest aspect is I feel I have lost not just my sister, but also my whole feeling of family togetherness. I never wanted to start a scene or make her big day about anything other than her pleasure. Now, unfortunately, all I have left are regrets and unanswered questions. So Reddit, I'm left wondering, was I incorrect in bringing Dan? I should have spotted a warning sign. Did I overlook any? Alternatively, was I correct to believe that families need to be allowed to partake in one another's life free from unwritten regulations and negative responses? I'm bewildered and perplexed, and I'm not sure if I will ever really know how something meant to be a happy event turned out. Update 1, hello everyone. Thank you first of all much for all of your comments and support. The number of people having similar experiences really astounded me, and knowing I'm not the only one going through anything like this comforts me. Some of your tales have opened my eyes and really helped me to understand the bizarre incidents that have occurred. Sadly, right now, my family is experiencing the very opposite of healing or understanding. We heard from no one for days after the wedding. This strange stillness made me start to wonder if maybe they just wanted space. Dan and I both assumed they would show up finally, but then our phones began to blossom with text messages out of nowhere. It was as if the floodgates had opened. Messages from friends, relatives, even some folks I hadn't talked to in years. And they weren't reaching out to provide support or understanding. From a homewrecker to a spoiled brat who had wrecked my sister's wedding day, they were calling me everything. At first, I assumed some of the messages were pranks because they were so nasty and ridiculous, but I soon saw these folks were genuine. One cousin told me another family accused me of wanting to ruin the wedding as I was envious of her happiness. Her husband's social media entries seemed to have set off a chain reaction. In his piece, he said that I was fixated on their connection, which sent people into a frenzy presuming the worst of me without even asking for my side. Worse, he left clues that I had gone out of my way to disgrace them by coming there with Dan, even though I honestly thought it was all just a mistake. It grew so severe that Dan's own family began to hear about it. Having been friends with my sister, they were startled by the way things had gone. Apparently, his mother even contacted my mother to attempt to sort things out, only to be advised what I had said. I felt crushed when Dan's mother told me this. My own mother was supporting these terrible falsehoods I plotted to upstage my sister on her big day. She was working against me. I also began seeing an unusual pattern in these family member texts. Everyone appeared to accept this story that I was fascinated on my sister's spouse, that somehow I'd been attempting to fit myself into their life, or had some secret goal. It sounded quite absurd. Still, those who knew me my whole life appeared to buy into it. And all of this was so painful and strange because, as I said before, my husband Dan had been to my sister like a brother. They had always had that sibling relationship, nothing else. But now others were implying that I had specifically used Dan to inflict damage on her. My sister, meanwhile, still hadn't been in touch. She was letting our family split us apart. ghosting me entirely, letting her new husband speak indirectly via his unpleasant postings. Desperate, I sought out her closest friend in hopes she might have some insight. Her friend said that while she couldn't say much, her sister had been coping with pre-wedding anxiety and that her fiancé's perspective of family relations had greatly affected her. Apparently, he had problems with several of her friends leading up the wedding and has a history of being possessive. That little bit of knowledge sent my head spinning. Imagine if he were deliberately attempting to break her off from her family, beginning with me. A few days later, my worst misgivings were validated. Usually one to stir the pot, a nasty cousin emailed me a snapshot of another post from my sister's husband. This time he went even further, stating straight out that he was happy to at last be rid of some toxic family members who had been attempting to dominate his new wife. He hinted that he had felt compelled to protect his wife from our shenanigans, and that Dan and I had been involved in some kind of retribution against them. I found it hard to believe. Not only was he lying, but now he was giving it sounds as if we had a lengthy history of being poisonous toward my sister. It was terrible and embarrassing. Worse, people were devouring it. By now, all of this had reached common acquaintances unrelated to the family, and I was beginning to feel alienated in my own neighborhood. I couldn't let all of this reaction pass me by either. I had a strong urge to see my sister and personally hear what she thought of everything being said about me. I therefore gave her one more call last minute. She missed, but a few hours later I got a text from her, a little note saying, "You crossed a line. You cannot return from here. With the decisions you took, perhaps, you are content." The book seemed to mark the end of our marriage. Heartbroken and shocked, I tried to understand how quickly everything had collapsed. Though Dan advised me to be quiet, warning me that it would just fan the flames, part of me wanted to post my side of the story on social media to defend myself against these terrible charges. And I knew he was correct, even if it hurt. Starting to defend myself online would make me appear guilty, as like I had anything to conceal. But at this time, it was not just about me. Dan became trapped in this dilemma as well. His own friends had called him, some of whom had seen the post and questioned why he would have gone to that level even turning there. Those ignorant of the message or the background have already branded him as some kind of disruptive agent. The combination of grief, guilt, and rage, I feel, is difficult to articulate. My sister has only been treated kindly by my husband. Today, he is being pulled through the muck. And even if I wish I could go back in time and never attend that wedding, a part of me knows would have ultimately occurred. Her spouse was clearly meant to be isolated, and it seems that I was just the first person shut off. One misinterpretation gone out of proportion has essentially caused me to lose not just my sister, but also my whole family. Now I'm the homewrecker, the poisonous family member, the one apparently fixated on upsetting other people's happiness, and all I did was show up to be there for my sister on her wedding day. Update number 2. A lot has been occurring that I had no knowledge of until lately. After a tense discussion with my mother, I'm starting to view the complete picture in a fresh, unsettling light. I went to see her as I couldn't let things go spinning without at least attempting to discuss it. I wanted to expose the falsehoods and discover why my family was so readily influenced by these damaging stories. My mother sounded defensive when I arrived, repeating the same things relatives had been saying, that I was attention-seeking and creating a commotion at the wedding, even branding me a homewrecker for starting strife in my sister's new marriage. It was the same laundry list of charges dumped at me over many weeks. She then said something, however, that made me stop dead still. "Given how your spouse regards your sister, you ought to have handled things better." I stared in shock. She was talking about something. I asked my mother to clarify what she meant by my husband's sentiments for her. Her face stayed the same, and it seemed as if my heart fell into my gut. She began to describe almost apathetic how my sister had been worried about Dan's emotions, and how that worry had grown after her engagement. As it happens, my sister told Trent about the connection she had with Dan, which we all considered to be a sibling-like attachment, when she became engaged to Trent. But Trent viewed things differently, as my mother's remarks helped me to see. He evidently persuaded her that Dan was unreliable and drawn to her. Trent said that my husband was smitten with my sister, and that he didn't want someone in love with his bride attending their wedding. My mother shrugged and informed me that sometimes individuals conceal their emotions effectively, hinting that my husband had somehow been harboring some hidden love for my sister all these years when I questioned her why she would even accept such a preposterous thought. Absurdity ruled. Though I wanted to laugh, I was furiously angry instead. Trent's envious anxiety was now casting the brother-sister bond Dan and my sister had always had as something twisted and improper. And that wasn't simply Trent's suggestion. This wrath had influenced even my parents and sister. Shaking, I asked my mother how she could possibly imagine that Dan, who had treated my sister with only compassion, would have any secret intention. She claimed to have observed indicators she had never seen before, such as the times he lent her money, or how quickly he would be to come to her assistance should she need it. It astounded me that simple acts of compassion were suddenly being fashioned into something orderly. Not content with that, my mother continued. She continued by telling me that my sister attempted to shield her from Dan by maintaining her distance when she initially expressed worries about him. Trent reportedly had informed her that Dan was fixated and would constantly threaten their relationship. Saying that I was allowing Dan's apparent fixation by continuously having him around, Trent had even urged her to keep space between herself and me. What I was hearing stunned me. Trent seemed to have been sowing seeds of uncertainty in my sister's mind, changing her view of Dan, and therefore, of course, me. He had developed this story wherein Dan and I were both attempting to undermine their happiness, and it worked. Telling my mom that none of this made sense, that Dan had no reason to be in love with my sister, and that we had all been close without any problems before Trent arrived, I attempted to argue with her, but she wouldn't listen. She stated that Trent was only attempting to protect my sister and that he sees things others do. That day, I left her home feeling more wounded than I had ever done. Apart from shattering my bond with my sister, Trent's jealousy had an effect on my own mother. I told Dan everything when I got home later. He stammered. The sister-like bond he had with her had somehow turned into this twisted story, which he couldn't believe. He remembered every moment he had assisted her, moments he believed he was just a sympathetic brother-in-law, and how those memories suddenly seemed tarnished. Jealousy was his weapon as he struggled to understand how a guy he hardly knew had turned my family against us. Later on, I contacted my parents letting them know they could believe anything they wanted, but I had already told my side and stood by it. I told them I knew Dan was being accused of something utterly false, and that if any truth had existed, I would have been the first to speak out about it. They have to realize I wouldn't be sticking by him only because he is my spouse. If anything were so bad, I would never endorse it. I went on to add that these accusations were beyond ridiculous and rather damaging, and that they spoke a lot about them that they would have chosen to side with their new son-in-law without any actual proof, or even allowing Dan or myself the benefit of the doubt. Supporting your children is one thing. However, this went too far, believing Trent's tale without evidence and turning against their own family like this. Dan and I had neither the time or the will to indulge in such stupidity, and I was not going to allow this ludicrous, unfounded drama pull us down. We were not interested in being part of this poisonous circus longer. Thus, for now, we are waiting to see whether they would come around or continuing choosing this untrue story over us. Whether they chose to believe in something so ridiculous, then that was their option. To tell the truth, I'm not sure what comes next. Update 3. Hey everyone! Though it's still difficult to understand all that has transpired, things have really turned out shockingly well. It appeared to disturb my parents a little after I sent that note to them. They at last began to see how distorted and out of character all these charges were. They volunteered to get in touch with some of our family and go over everything that had occurred. Though I'm not sure exactly what was stated in those exchanges, whatever it was must have let them recognize how ridiculous and baseless Trent's assertions were. And since then, several family members, including cousins, aunts, and uncles, have apologized sent me. Some even said they regret leaping to decisions without first consulting me. It still hurts even if I value them admitting their error. That so many of them were ready to accept such a ludicrous narrative bothers me. It stings to realize that they believed Dan was behaving badly all along, particularly with someone he considered to be his sister. Though I'm happy they're showing up, I can't pretend it doesn't make me feel bitter. But yesterday night, something even more unexpected occurred, so all of that faded into the background. My sister came up to my place utterly out of the blue. She gave the impression of having gone through a lot. She seemed to have not slept. Her hair was messy, her eyes red from weeping. She is my sister, thus witnessing her like that wounded my heart notwithstanding anything else. Figuring we could chat and maybe sort things out, I opened the door and allowed her in. She began weeping as soon as she sank into her seat. She started talking about what had occurred with Trent after she started to cool up somewhat. She informed me that she and Trent had just had a major dispute that changed her viewpoint on things. She said, crying, that Dan wasn't the only guy Trent had accused of pining for her. This apparently has been going on for some time. Trent's conduct first looked benign, maybe even pleasing in an odd kind. But she stated it began when they were out in public and Trent would observe random males apparently glancing at her. Though it seemed a little odd, she believed it was just him being protective when he made minor remarks about how other males were staring her improperly. But his conduct became more erratic with time. His charges surfaced in almost every scenario, and finally his attention turned to others in her life, especially Dan. He was really persuasive when he started discussing Dan. Trent sounded as like he was really concerned, as though he was only watching out for her and wanted to keep her safe from anything unpleasant. She went along because he kept bringing it up and she trusted him. She thus didn't dispute it when he stated Dan shouldn't attend the wedding. Listening to her fiancé's worries and honoring his requests, she felt she was acting morally. But things descended further after their wedding. Trent had begun accusing even more people of feeling anything for her, and it was no more a remark here and there. Saying one of her male Keo employees had eyes for her, and it wouldn't be safe for her to be near him, he had now started urging her to abandon her employment. She came to see then that this was not at all typical. Trent was isolating her by forcing her to shut people out from her life and give up her freedom. It went beyond simply Dan or hapless strangers now. It was about underlining her dominance over her and her surrounds. When she at last realized his so-called protectiveness was really simply obsessive and manipulative conduct, she felt surprised, controlled, and betrayed. She acknowledged she felt like a fool for not recognizing it sooner, and that she had been caught in his dominating actions. Clearly devastated and embarrassed by her treatment of us was my sister. She said she was sorry to me. When she apologized to Dan, I could sense remorse in her eyes. She stated she had made a big mistake and that she would have allowed her confidence in Trent persuade her to follow whatever he advised. I could see for the first time how damaged she was by what she had done, and I knew she really felt remorse. She is currently staying with us to have some alone time and decide what to do going forward. Though it hurts to see her go through this, and I know this is a very difficult period for her, at the same time I feel a great feeling of relief the truth is at last out. False charges no longer weigh on my spouse, and my family can see Trent's conduct for what it is. I'm ready to be by my sister's side whatever happens next. Though I'm still digesting everything, I'm appreciative that at last the truth has surfaced and we are on the road ahead. Update 4. Hi everyone. I'm sorry for silence. I know many of you requested an update. Over the hectic, emotional couple of months, a lot has changed. Last time I told how my sister dropped by my house at last understanding Trent's control. She went back to him, resolved not to let him push her around anymore and to retain her job. When she told him, however, he plummeted totally. He accused her of being disloyal, claiming that if she wanted to remain working, she must be interested in other men. His response was so fierce and uncontrolled that she ended up leaving again and coming right back to me, more upset than ever. It was heart-wrenching to watch her go through this, but it also appeared to provide her some clarity. Over the following week, we spoke a lot, and she came to recognize that this was no longer a relationship she wanted to be in. She came to the agonizing choice to end things and file for divorce. As predicted, Trent did not take it well. He came up at my apartment begging and weeping, swearing he'd change and never behave this way again. It was heartbreaking to witness, particularly because he appeared really regretful. But my sister kept her own. She recognized that his conduct had crossed so many boundaries, and there was no going back to a position of trust. So, in brief, my sister's going through a divorce presently. It's a terrible moment for her, but I'm trying my best to be there for her. Dan has been maintaining his distance a little, which I understand. Everything that happened has placed a strain on their relationship, but he's still supportive and checks in on her because he knows she needs all the help she can get right now. My parents have also really stepped up. They've been assisting her with the legal procedures and giving her with emotional assistance, which has made a great impact. They've also taken this moment to apologize to both Dan and myself, particularly to Dan, for ever believing Trent's charges. It's like they finally understood exactly how off base everything was. Honestly, it's been an exhausting road, but I feel happy for the clarity that came out of it. My sister is in a better position, even though it's challenging, and my family has gotten closer in certain respects. I want to thank everyone here for their inspiration and support. It was heartening to read your remarks, urging us to be strong and trust in ourselves. Thank you all so much for being here through this.